The first time I realized my family's love came with conditions was the night I told them about Daniel. It was supposed to be a normal Sunday dinner, the kind where my mother overcooked the roast just slightly, and my father talked endlessly about business deals no one else cared about. My older sister scrolled through her phone between bites, occasionally chiming in just enough to stay relevant. It was predictable, safe, controlled. That's what my family valued most, control. I had rehearsed the words all the way there, my palms sweating against the steering wheel. I told myself it wouldn't be as bad as I imagined. After all, they loved me, didn't they? I met someone. I said finally, my voice softer than I intended. My mother's fork paused midair. My father didn't look up, but I could tell he was listening now. My sister raised an eyebrow, mildly interested. "What does he do?" my father asked, cutting straight to what mattered most to him. "He's an architect," I replied, a small smile forming despite my nerves. "His name is Daniel. What family?" my mother added quickly, as if that was equally important. I hesitated. Just for a second, and that second changed everything. "He's not from around here," I said carefully. "And he's black." Silence, not the comfortable kind. Not the kind that settles gently between people who know each other well. This silence was sharp, heavy. It pressed against my chest until I could barely breathe. My father slowly set his knife down, the sound echoing louder than it should have. My mother's expression didn't just change. It hardened like a door slamming shut. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cold and precise. "What did you just say?" I swallowed. "I said I'm seeing someone. His name is Daniel, and yes, he's black." My sister let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You're joking, right?" "I'm not joking," I said, my voice shaking now, but not from doubt. From the sudden realization that I had just stepped onto a battlefield I hadn't prepared for. My father finally looked at me. His eyes filled not with curiosity, but disappointment. "You can't be serious," he said. "I am," I replied. "He's kind, he's thoughtful, and he treats me. That's enough." My mother snapped, cutting me off. "Do you have any idea what people will say?" There it was, not concern for me, not even an attempt to understand. Just reputation. "I don't care what people say," I said, the words surprising even me with their firmness. "I care about how he treats me, and he treats me better than anyone ever has." My mother scoffed, shaking her head. "This is a phase, it has to be." "It's not a phase," I said. "I love him." The word hung in the air like something dangerous. My father stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Love," he repeated, as if the word itself offended him. "You're willing to throw away everything, your future, your family, for this. For him." I corrected quietly. That was the moment everything broke. "You will end this," my mother said, her voice no longer cold, but sharp, almost desperate. "You will end it now, and we will forget this ever happened." I stared at her, my chest tightening. No, it was a simple word, but it felt like jumping off a cliff. "No," my father echoed, his tone darkening. "Then let me make this very clear." He stepped closer, his presence towering, suffocating. "If you continue this relationship, if you marry him, you are no longer our daughter." My heart stopped. For a moment I thought I had misheard him, that this was some cruel exaggeration, a threat meant to scare me into obedience. But the look on his face told me everything. He meant it. My mother didn't protest. My sister didn't intervene. No one did. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of them. "I didn't think your love for me was conditional," I said, my voice breaking despite my efforts. "It's not," my mother replied quickly. "But your choices have consequences." I let out a bitter laugh. "No, Your love has conditions, and I just failed to meet them." The room felt smaller, suffocating. I looked at the people who had raised me, who were supposed to protect me, and realized I didn't recognize them anymore. Or maybe I finally saw them clearly. "I'm not leaving him," I said. The words sealed my fate. My father nodded once, as if confirming a business decision. "Then you're leaving this family." And just like that, I had lost everything. A week later, I married Daniel in a small ceremony at a quiet courthouse. No white dress, no family in the front row, no father walking me down the aisle. But when Daniel held my hands and looked at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered, I felt something I had never felt in that house full of rules and expectations. Peace. As we walked out together, hand in hand, I didn't look back. Because deep down, I knew there was nothing left for me there anymore. The first year after I lost my family felt like learning how to breathe all over again. Not because I didn't know how, but because everything I had once depended on was suddenly gone. No more safety net. No more familiar voices, no more place to run when life got hard, just Daniel and me, and somehow that had to be enough. We moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city. The paint was chipped in places. The heater worked when it felt like it. And the kitchen was so small we had to take turns just to cook a meal. It was nothing like the spacious home I had grown up in, where everything had its place and appearances mattered more than comfort. But for the first time in my life, I felt something that house had never given me. Freedom. Still, freedom came at a price. There were nights I cried quietly in the bathroom, sitting on the cold tile floor so Daniel wouldn't hear me. Nights when the silence felt too loud, when I'd instinctively reach for my phone to call my mother, only to remember there was no one on the other end anymore. Holidays were the hardest. The first time Thanksgiving came around, I didn't know what to do with myself. I had always complained about my mother's overcooked meals, my father's long speeches. But when the day arrived and there was nothing but quiet, I would have given anything to hear those familiar, irritating sounds again. Daniel noticed, of course. He always did. "Hey," he said gently that morning, finding me staring blankly out the window. "How about we start our own traditions?" I forced a small smile. "Like what?" "Well," he said, pretending to think hard, "we could burn the turkey ourselves this year. Keep it authentic." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in days, and just like that, the heaviness lifted, if only a little. We didn't have much money back then. Daniel was working long hours at a small architecture firm, trying to prove himself, while I took on whatever jobs I could find. There were months when we had to carefully calculate every expense, choosing between things we needed and things we could live without. But somehow, we never felt poor, because everything we built together. Late nights turned into shared dreams. We'd sit on the worn-out couch, talking about the future like it was something we could shape with our own hands. One day, Daniel would say, pulling me closer, "We're going to have a place of our own. Big windows, lots of light, and a kitchen where we don't have to take turns. And a heater that actually works." I'd add, "luxury." He'd tease, grinning. Years passed faster than I expected. Slowly, things began to change. Daniel's hard work paid off. He earned promotions, respect, recognition. I found stability too, building a career I was proud of. The tiny apartment turned into a small house. Then a better one, and somewhere along the way, the life we once struggled to imagine became real. But the most beautiful change wasn't the house or the money or the stability. It was us, because through every hardship, every quiet night, every moment of doubt, we never turned against each other. We held on tighter. When I had nightmares about my family, about being rejected, Abandoned Daniel would wake me up gently, pulling me close until my breathing steadied. "You're not alone," he'd whisper, "not anymore," and he meant it. When our daughter was born, everything shifted again. The moment I held her in my arms, something deep inside me healed in a way I hadn't thought was possible. She was perfect, tiny, warm, and completely ours. As I looked down at her, I made a silent promise. She would never have to earn my love. It wouldn't come with conditions, expectations, or ultimatums. It would simply exist, unshaken, unbreakable. Just like the family Daniel and I had created together. Of course, the past didn't disappear completely. There were still moments unexpected, sharp, when it came rushing back, a familiar song, a passing memory. The sight of a mother and daughter laughing together in a store. And for a split second, the old wound would ache. But it didn't control me anymore, because I had learned something my family never understood. Love isn't about control. It isn't about image or approval or bending someone into who you want them to be. It's about showing up, staying, choosing each other over and over again. 9 years ago, I thought I had lost everything. But standing in my living room now, watching my daughter laugh as Daniel lifted her into the air, I realized the truth. I hadn't lost everything. I had lost what was never truly mine to begin with, and in its place I had built something real. It was a quiet afternoon when my past finally found me again, the kind of quiet I had learned to love. Sunlight spilled through the wide windows of our living room just like Daniel had once promised, and the soft hum of life filled the house. Our daughter's laughter echoed faintly from upstairs, where Daniel was helping her with a school project that seemed to involve more glue than necessary. I was in the kitchen, absent, mindedly stirring a cup of coffee I had already forgotten to drink, when the doorbell rang. Once, then again, sharper this time, I frowned slightly. We weren't expecting anyone. Wiping my hands on a towel, I walked toward the door, a strange unease settling in my chest. Something about the timing, the insistence. It didn't feel like a casual visit. When I opened the door, the world didn't just pause. It tilted. My mother stood there. For a moment, I didn't recognize her. Not because I had forgotten her face, but because time had changed it. The sharpness I remembered was still there, but it had dulled around the edges. There were lines where there hadn't been before. A heaviness in her posture that spoke of years I hadn't been part of. But her eyes, they were exactly the same, calculating, observing, measuring. "Hello," she said, just that. No warmth, no hesitation, no acknowledgement of the 9 years that had passed like a lifetime between us. I gripped the edge of the door, steadying myself. My heart pounded not with joy, not even with sadness, but with something colder. "Shock, you shouldn't be here," I said quietly. Her lips pressed into a thin line, as if my response had mildly inconvenienced her. "Are you going to make me stand out here, or are you going to invite me in?" The audacity of it nearly made me laugh. 9 years of silence, 9 years of absence, and this was how she returned. Still something inside me shifted. Not forgiveness, not even curiosity, control. I stepped aside, opening the door just enough. "Come in." She walked past me without another word, her eyes scanning the house as if evaluating it. "Taking notes, judging, it's nice," she said after a moment, though her tone made it sound like she was settling for the compliment. I closed the door slowly, my fingers tightening around the handle. "What do you want?" I asked. She turned to face me then, finally meeting my eyes fully. And for a split second, just a split second, I thought I saw something unfamiliar, not pride, not anger, desperation, but it disappeared so quickly, I almost convinced myself I imagined it. "I came to talk," she said. "About what?" My voice was steady now, too steady. "About family," she replied. The word hit harder than it should have. Family, as if she hadn't erased me from that very concept nearly a decade ago. "You lost the right to use that word with me," I said. Her expression tightened, but she didn't argue. Instead, she took a slow breath, as if preparing herself. "Things have changed," she said carefully. I crossed my arms, waiting. "Your father's business," she hesitated. "It hasn't been doing well." I said nothing. "Your sister," another pause. "She's going through a difficult divorce." Still, I didn't respond. "And she stopped, her voice catching just slightly before she continued. "We've had some financial setbacks." There it was. And not an apology, not regret, a problem. And somehow, they had decided I was the solution. I let out a slow breath, the pieces falling into place with almost cruel clarity. "So you're here because you need something." Her silence confirmed it. "How did you even find me?" I asked. "It wasn't difficult," she said. "People talk." Of course they did. The same people she had once been so desperate to impress. "And what exactly do you need?" I pressed. She straightened slightly, slipping back into something more familiar. Something controlled. "Help," she said, "financially, and support." I stared at her, waiting for more, and, she added, almost as an afterthought, "I'd like to meet my granddaughter." Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but cleanly, like a thread finally breaking after being pulled too tight for too long. 9 years. 9 years of silence, of absence, of choosing pride over love. And now she stood in my home, asking for access to the life she had rejected as if it were her right. I felt the old pain stir sharp, familiar, but it didn't consume me the way it once would have, because this time I wasn't the one standing there powerless. She was, and for the first time since she had walked through that door, I felt something unexpected rise within me. Not anger, not sadness, clarity. I looked at her not as a daughter desperate for approval, not as the girl she had once controlled, but as someone who had survived her absence and built something stronger in its place. "You came here to ask for help," I said slowly. She nodded. "And you think you deserve it?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. For the first time, she didn't have an immediate answer. And in that silence, I realized everything had changed. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, thick with everything that had never been said, every harsh word, every slammed door. Every night I had cried myself to sleep wondering how love could disappear so easily. My mother shifted slightly, as if the weight of my question had finally reached her. "And you think you deserve it?" I watched her carefully. This was the woman who had once held all the power, the one whose approval I had chased, whose disappointment had felt like the end of the world. But standing here now, in the home I had built without her, she looked smaller, not physically, but in a way that mattered more. "I'm still your mother," she said finally, her voice firm but lacking the authority it once carried. "That doesn't change." I let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "No," I said softly. "It doesn't." For a split second, something like relief flickered across her face, as if she thought I was agreeing with her. Then I continued, "But what that means does." Her expression hardened again, the familiar tension returning. "I didn't come here to argue." "Of course you didn't," I replied. "You came here to take." The words landed exactly where they needed to. She flinched, barely noticeable, but enough. "I came here because I had no choice," she said, her tone sharpening defensively. "Families help each other." I shook my head slowly. "No, families don't abandon each other." That hit deeper. I could see it in her eyes, the crack she tried to hide. For the first time since she arrived, she didn't have a quick response. So I stepped closer, not in anger but in certainty. "Do you remember what you said to me?" I asked. "That night," her gaze faltered, "you told me if I married Daniel, I wasn't your daughter anymore." I continued. "You didn't hesitate. You didn't try to understand. You didn't even ask if I was happy." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Every word carried years of quiet truth. "You chose your image over me." I said. You chose what people would think over your own child. That's not, she started, but I didn't let her finish. It is, I said firmly, and the worst part, you meant it. The room fell silent again. Upstairs, I could hear faint laughter, Daniel's voice, warm and steady, blending with our daughter's bright giggles. A life my mother had never been part of. A life she had chosen to reject. I struggled after I left. I went on, my voice softer now, but no less steady. I missed you. I missed all of you. There were nights I would have done anything just to hear your voice again. Her eyes flickered, something unreadable passing through them. But you were gone, I said, not because you had to be, but because you chose to be. I let that settle before continuing. And now you're here, I said, not because you missed me, not because you regret what you did. I held her gaze. But because you need something. This time she didn't deny it. She couldn't. I didn't come here to beg. She said quietly, though the edge in her voice had softened into something closer to exhaustion. No, I replied. You came here expecting. Another truth she couldn't argue with. Her shoulders lowered slightly, the fight draining out of her in a way I had never seen before. For a moment I almost felt sorry for her, almost. I'm not going to give you what you want, I said. The words were calm, final. She looked up sharply. So that's it. You're just going to turn your back on your own family. I met her gaze without hesitation. You turned your back on me first. The difference was I wasn't saying it with anger. I was saying it with acceptance. I've spent 9 years building a life. I continued, a real one, with people who chose me every single day. I glanced toward the stairs, a small smile touching my lips before I looked back at her. My husband is my family, I said. My daughter is my family. I paused, and family doesn't disappear when things get inconvenient. The words hung between us, undeniable. She looked around the room again, but this time there was no judgment in her eyes, only realization. You've done well for yourself, she said quietly. I have, I replied, without you. That was the truth she needed to hear. Not cruel, not exaggerated, just true. She nodded slowly, as if absorbing something she couldn't quite process. And my granddaughter, she asked after a moment, do I at least get to meet her? I took a breath. This was the moment that mattered most. Not revenge, not punishment, choice. You don't get to walk into her life like nothing happened, I said gently. You don't get to be her grandmother when you couldn't be my mother. Her face fell, the weight of that finally settling in. But, I added after a pause, if you ever want to be part of this family, it starts with the truth. She looked up at me, confused. An apology, I said simply, a real one, no excuses, no conditions, a silence, long, heavy, honest. For once, she didn't know what to say, and that told me everything. I walked to the door and opened it. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of clarity. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said. She hesitated for a moment, as if expecting me to stop her. I didn't, and slowly she walked out. As the door closed behind her, I felt something shift inside me. Not emptiness, not regret, freedom, because 9 years ago, I thought losing my family would break me. But standing there now, surrounded by the life I had built, I finally understood the truth. I hadn't lost them. I had let them go, and in doing so, I had finally found myself.